In this video, we're reviewing the Legend of Ochi and singing the sweet song of the forest with a botanical and fruity cocktail called the Ochi. Today, on the Martini Shot. Hello and welcome to the Martini Shot, the home of movie reviews and movie-themed cocktails. Before we get into the review, let's whip ourselves up a drink. So the Ochi is going to be a bit of a tangerine gin sour. It's going to be nice, bright, and fruity with just a hint of botanicals thanks to that gin and the implementation of some Benedictine. But then we're also going to be going the extra mile by making a nice blueberry foam that we are going to layer on top of the cocktail. For that blueberry foam, I'm going to be using this thing called an ISI whipper. If you don't happen to have one of those, you can always make the foam in a shaker. Just make sure you're making it in a separate shaker from where you're building the actual drink. Let's get into it. So if you do happen to be using an ISI whipper, you are going to want to make that foam first, just because after you make it, you're going to want to let it sit in the fridge for a bit before you actually put it on top of the cocktail. But whether you're using the whipper or just a shaker, first you're going to be adding 1.5 ounces of blue curacao, 5 muddled blueberries, half an ounce of lemon juice, and then finally 2 whole egg whites. If you're using the shaker to build the foam, then you can go ahead and dry shake for about 20 seconds. But I would probably hold off and shake it closer to when you're actually going to be finishing the cocktail. But if you're using the whipper, you're going to be loading it up with a canister, giving it a quick shake, removing that canister, adding a new one, and then giving it a quick shake again. And then you're gonna wanna let that whipper sit in the fridge for about 30 minutes. All right, now we can go ahead and get into the cocktail itself, which is also gonna be built in a shaker. First, let's start with a little bit of simple syrup at 1/4 ounce, 3/4 ounces of lemon juice, and 1.5 ounces of tangerine juice. And now for our alcoholic ingredients, first you're gonna be adding half an ounce of Benedictine, a herbal liqueur, and then 2 ounces of gin. And then finally, to give it a little bit of body, we are also gonna be adding 1 egg white to the cocktail itself. So if you're keeping track, that is 3 eggs that you'll be using for this entire cocktail. You're definitely free to use cartoned egg white in place of real egg white. So first you're gonna want to dry shake the cocktail. That means shaking it with no ice for about 20 seconds to get a nice frothy body. And once you're done, go ahead and throw ice into the shaker and shake to chill. And once you're done, you can go ahead and strain that into a coupe glass or a martini glass, which happens to be all I have on hand at the moment. And then once your foam is ready, you can go ahead and add that on top as well. And there you go, now you have the Ochi. So it's like I said, it's nice, bright, little bit of sweetness, little bit of floralness. A good chunk of that floralness comes from that Benedictine, though I will say it's a bit subdued underneath the tangerine juice. But I think the tangerine juice really kind of pulls it away from being that bitter herbal liqueur that we know it to be. And with the texture of the egg white coming from both the cocktail and the foam, it does kind of have this nice little dessertiness to it. It's very similar to a creamsicle with a little bit of blueberry notes. And I know that blueberry foam is quite a bit of work to make, but if you happen to have an ISI whipper, it makes it a lot easier. And it's easily been one of my favorite gadgets to play around with in the kitchen. And it's easily been one of my favorite gadgets to play around with behind the bar. But even if you wanted to skip all of that foam nonsense, it's still a very good, very straightforward cocktail at its heart. Now that we have our drink, let's get right into the review. Now is the time when we should be going out of our way to support originality in film. Sure, we can all cry out about the lack of new ideas in Hollywood, but when it comes time to speak with our wallets, it's the remakes and big name IPs raking in the most money by year's end. Rarely does actual, genuine artistry get recognized, but it does happen. The summer of Barbenheimer was a fantastic example of this, and even now, Sinners is tracking to do way better than projected thanks to tremendous word of mouth. I love to see it, and I wanted to keep the train rolling by checking out A24's latest fantasy film, The Legend of Ochi. And by God, I probably should have just gone and saw Sinners again. It's easy to get drawn into the film's quirky, fantastical aura, and rightfully so. Director Isaiah Saxon and crew have crafted a visually marvelous film that utilizes plenty of old school techniques that just simply can't be beat by computer generation. From paintings to puppets, this had all the trimmings to deliver a whimsical, dark fantasy film, the likes of which I have not seen in a long while. Unfortunately, those visuals just aren't enough to save its narrative shortcomings. I was disappointed to find this film to be dry, lopsided, and wholly unengaging for a good chunk of the runtime. It really pains me to say this because there was so much potential here to create a modern fantasy worth talking about for years to come. But unfortunately, this fantasy is far from fantastic. Set in a secluded mountainous island in the Black Sea, we follow a young girl named Yuri, who becomes fascinated with the Ochi, supposedly dangerous creatures that her father tries to hunt with his gang of young boys. But when Yuri makes contact with a baby Ochi, she finds these creatures to not be what they seem and decides to set off on a quest to return the child back to its parents. I do want to focus as much as I can on the artistry of this film because for all my problems with the film itself, it is still a wonder to behold. The Carpathian mountain ranges are presented in sweeping, saturated vistas that fully translate their scale to film. Seeing Yuri traverse the open, empty ranges makes this feel like a proper wilderness adventure, but there are also some beautiful physical sets made with such care and craftsmanship, looking both stylized yet legitimate. There's a cave near the end of the film that glitters with stalactites coated in dew that just looks phenomenal. Even some of the backgrounds are made with expertly crafted matte paintings that harkens back to the golden days of Hollywood. I also really enjoy the film's color palette, kind of mimicking the colors of the Ochi themselves with orange hues and blue highlights. And let's talk about those weird little apes because they are certainly the star of the show. If you thought Grogu was something to behold, well, he looks like a sock puppet compared to what the team has done here. Through a mix of animatronics, full-body suits, and puppets, the Ochi have been given an undeniable sense of realism to them. From full-body motions to minor face movements, these are some of the most impressive examples of physical creature creations I've seen in a hot minute, especially with the baby Ochi, who we get to spend a lot of time gawking over. He was apparently controlled by a total of 7 people at once to nail the subtle, gentle movements of the creature, and I have to say, they really hit it out of the park. Yeah, it can look a bit hokey at times, especially when the creature is supposed to be moving fast, but it's too charming for me to really care. Even with all the advancements we've seen in motion capture and digital rendering, I still think I prefer when something is actually there on set, interacting with the actors. Truthfully, it makes a world of difference. Speaking of the actors, there's unfortunately not a ton to really write home about. This isn't really at fault to them, as there's obvious talent at work here, but the film's narrative and direction kind of saddles them into underdeveloped or unexplored roles. The father-daughter relationship between Helena Zengel's Yuri and Willem Dafoe's Maxim lacks proper attention and detail that makes their eventual rekindling impactful, while the role of Finn Wolfhard's Petro wastes the potential of having an adopted son never really seen as a son in favor of an uninfluential background character. The surface-level ideas of finding out that you don't belong in your own family has some loose connections to the setting, which is beginning to grow modernized with imports like grocery stores and heavy metal music. Yet I never felt as if the elements actually impacted the story in any meaningful way. Teen angst, parental separation, and the understanding of our bond with nature are all present, though they feel more like checked boxes rather than integral parts to the narrative. And for a film bursting at the seams with creative visuals and designs, the narrative voice just doesn't seem up to snuff. The dry, stunted dialogue and deliveries occasionally give way to a few laughs, but I actually found it to be rather drab. It's not like Wes Anderson films where the stoicism of the characters feeds into the ridiculousness of the story. Rather, it kind of feels like it's keeping the audience at arm's length, never letting us develop any real reason to care about these characters. Dafoe's commitment does elevate his role a tad, but everything else just can't keep up. This is noticeable in the pacing as well, where the film teeters with being far too patient in more meditative scenes, while being far too abrupt and scatterbrained in the more high-energy moments. Truthfully, I just don't know if this knew what it wanted to be. I think it's far too slow-paced for kids to enjoy, though the fantastic visuals are certainly an alluring worm on a hook. It may succeed at giving older audiences a hint of nostalgia through the vintage artistry at work, but nothing about the story is really going to excite them in the same way that the visuals do. Like I said, I'm so disappointed to find this isn't the American live-action Studio Ghibli-esque film we probably all wanted, but there is still plenty to admire about it. I only hope that the filmmakers can see this as a learning experience and try again with that same craftsmanship while putting a bit more thought into creating a narrative that properly services the incredible effects work. And A24, please start reevaluating what you put your money into. I know you saw the Ochi and your first thought was to make a $400 plushie that like 20 people will buy. For my rating, I'm giving this film 2.5 fake fangs out of 5. Guys, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Martini Shot. If you saw The Legend of Ochi, let me know what you thought about it down in the comments. And if you like what you saw here and would like to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow me across all social media channels. Those links are down in the description below. If you enjoy movie reviews and movie-themed cocktails, be sure to check out my website, martinishot.blog. Until next time, thank you again for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Live deliciously, but please remember to drink responsibly.